What do they do?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, right. She's at the theater appointment earlier. Okay, it's good. It's good for.
You sure?
We're gonna find out.
Are you serious right now? You're not, the jinx is in.
Just jinxed it.
Yeah.
All right. Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, March 2nd, 2023 Scarborough Board of Education Business Meeting. Can we have the attendance, please?
Sure. Miss Gammon,
Here.
Gallagher,
Here.
Miss Leong,
Here.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Here.
Mr. Mayorino,
Here.
Miss Tarpinian,
Here.
Mr. Peony Huff,
Here.
Miss Bertulia,
She's been excused.
and Mr. Shumway.
He's also been excused. All right, can everybody please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, agenda item 4.0 are adjustments to the agenda. Are there any adjustments this evening?
Yes, we have one adjustment. We are just going to swap 6.0 and 8.0. So the superintendent's report, which will be presentation on the high school program of studies, will just get moved up in exchange for the Scarborough enrollment study. So we're just going to have 8 where 6 should be and 6 where 8 is. Does that make sense?
Good. All right. Perfect. So we'll make that adjustment. Agenda item 5.0 is public comment on agenda item. Is there anybody interested in making public comment this evening? All right, seeing none, we will close public comment. So then the new 6.0 will be the superintendent report 8.1, the 2023-2024 high school program of studies. And we will invite Sue Ketch and Monique to the front.
Thank you so much. We have a couple of slides. I will do a little bit of background information on how the program of studies is built, and then Sue Ketch will share with you some of the changes within the program of studies for the coming year for your consideration. So the high school program of studies, it really is a almost a full year process as staff work with students, and students bring forth their interests and needs, and staff come up with new ideas. So the staff gather that feedback from students, but it's really based on both students' interests, but also their student needs. And as you know, our student needs are changing over time. So there is continually something new every year. So the timeline for updates is really a fascinating one. It really begins in November, December as ideas come forward. I'm usually involved in those conversations, particularly if they are new courses. So the proposals are formally due in by February 1st. And Sue Ketch and I sit down and have conversations. We actually meet with the teachers to talk about what resources, what training they might need, those sorts of things. Then the information goes to the school board's curriculum committee, and we met in February and talked about some of these changes. And then it comes to you in March for approval. So that you know and understand a little bit about our high school program of studies, we have about 700 different course offerings for our students. So we have a vast array of offerings and courses. As students sign up for those courses, which are requirements, and also for their electives, their choices that they have within their schedule, what happens in the program and the software is the principal and the leadership team get a printout of all of those requests. And then they go through and they look at the enrollments within those requests to decide which courses they indeed will float in a schedule, and which courses, for example, there might be an elective in which there are only 2 students signed up. So they may not float that elective, or if there are other similar electives and the teacher is willing, they might combine those courses and things. So that's really the process about building a schedule to meet all students' needs. Turn it over to Sue to talk about the changes.
Thank you, Monique. So we don't have a ton of changes when you kind of consider that We have over 700 options. We had relatively few changes this year, but I wanted to highlight a few things. First, let me just tell you a little bit about how it works at Scarborough High School, because I know we have some newer board members. So the whole thing begins with the program of studies, which should get launched next week if we approve it tonight. And then students will start looking at that, and core teachers, math, science, social studies, and English will meet with the students in their class. They'll take a class period, maybe pull a desk out into the hallway and have conversations with students about what they recommend they sign up for next year. And then when that's all done, eventually guidance will go into classrooms. I believe this year they're going to go into social studies classrooms and help students register for their core courses, but also all their electives. And then that's the point, once we get all those numbers in there, that we start talking about what are we going to offer, how many classes can we fit in? And then also, our teachers will take a look at, for the core classes, they'll take a look at what their students signed up for. And if it's vastly different from what they recommended, they will flag that, and the guidance counselors will meet with those students individually to hear why they made a different selection than the teacher did, et cetera. And then we run the schedule once everybody's put their options in. And then that's when Sean Bushway, the Power School guru, and I will work on the master schedule. Basically, for the past few years, we've done what we have called just rolled the schedule forward. So Scarborough High School has innumerous singletons, maybe 2 periods. And so what we have over the years tweaked a schedule that kind of takes into account individual needs, what students in one grade might need, how to fit band and chorus in to periods where there wouldn't be like a singleton that a student would have to choose this one class that they really need to take and not get to take chorus. So we make changes really now only where we see there have been issues. So one example, a few years ago now, the guidance counselors were saying that our anatomy and physiology class was hitting a lot of conflicts. And so we looked at it very closely, and what we decided was, for that teacher, if we switched the day that they taught biology with the day they taught anatomy and physiology, it was all fixed. So we made that one change, a fairly minor one in the schedule, but it did help a lot of students out. So we pretty much roll the schedule forward, taking into account the new requests from students. So I just wanted you to kind of know how that works. And the last thing I wanted to say is that Scarborough High School really lets children stretch themselves academically if they would like to. There are some schools where if you kind of come in as a level 3 college prep student, you meet with great pushback if you want to do something different from that. And we really try to think openly about that. Sometimes you'll have a student that has started to center in on a major they want. So they feel like, I want to take a harder science class because I think I might want to go into nursing. And we really stay open to that. So we also have, at the end of this process, students and families can do a course request with the principal, where they have a form that they can explain why they would like to take on this challenge and what supports they might have in place to take on the challenge. And wherever possible, we try to be open to, if you would like to try it, we're going to have you try it. So even right up till the very end of the schedule building, we really do try to meet the needs of our children. And so I just wanted you to kind of know a little bit about that. In terms of this year's program of studies, we have a couple of new classes. So this year, for the first time, we have more English language learning students than we have had in many, many years. And I've been there a long time, so I can really honestly say that. And so our ELL teacher, her strongest courses that her favorite courses to teach are more in the social studies and English area. And so I worked with the science and the math department heads. And so we are going to offer some classes that will meet their needs. So for example, we're going to offer in math a Foundations of Algebra course. So if we have students arriving at Scarborough High School that have language challenges and also I'm going to say have holes in their learning and they're not ready for algebra, which is generally the starter course for freshmen for us. We're going to do a Foundations of Algebra course where we can really have a smaller class size and really work with those students in a regular ed class setting taught by the math department so that they're really kind of getting the best of both worlds. And so we really wanted to try to offer that this year as a way to help some of our newer English students to succeed and to get started in regular ed classes. Also in mathematics, we're offering accounting again. This is not a brand new course for Scarborough High. Back 12 years ago, we offered accounting. It sort of came out of favor and wasn't getting a lot of sign up. It was eventually taken out of the program of studies, but we have a new business teacher, Mr. Cronin, has moved up from the middle school this year. And as he's been talking to students about his offerings, he got a tremendous amount of interest in would we consider offering an accounting class again? And so he's put an accounting class together and we're going to offer that and see what we get for sign up for that. Then in science and technology, again, with the ELL thought in mind, we're going to offer a Foundations of Biology and a Foundations of Environmental Science. Now, environmental science is usually taken by freshmen, and we happen to be lucky enough to have a person on staff that has the environmental science certification, but also biology, and he does teach both. So what we're looking at with him is that 1 year we'll offer environmental science and then he'll loop and the next year he'll teach the biology. And then when we have English language learners coming in, they'll take whichever course he's teaching the year they come, and then they'll take the other course the next year. They'll just do it in their own rotation. And our game plan there is that after the 2 years, they will have learned enough science language and had that special attention in a regular ed classroom to then launch into a science course on their own after the 2-year plan. So I'm really excited that we've looked at some really creative ways to help those students. Then there are some smaller edits that we have. Fine arts and PE did update some descriptions. They changed the name of a couple of things, and they changed some dates for events in the music department. Science and technology has done some course name changes that more accurately cover what we're teaching now. Social studies did change a text, and that's reflected in there. And then there are a few changes, like one example I would give is in our music department, our new band teacher. Our previous teacher had a workbook that students did their theory in that she ordered every year, and they got a copy. He is more interested in doing his own theory lessons based on the music that the students are working on. And he would rather have that flexibility of creating his own lessons to match the music they're working on. So we've taken that course, that book title out. So we've made a few changes like that, but those are primarily small changes. But you should have received the little packet of the changes and the whole. If you're interested in reading 700 courses, you should have gotten that too. But I just wanted to highlight some of the bigger things that we worked on this year.
This is great. Thank you so much, Sue and Monique. Are there any questions? I just want to say thank you so much. I know having a child in school, I understand about the wide variety of classes, and it's really special for our students to be able to find their niche and really work to what they're interested in, right? And there is quite a wide range. So I would encourage even members of our public to look at the book and really delve into all of those. I know it's a lot, it's 700 courses, but it's exciting to see all the opportunities that are available.
It is. And it should be launched on the high school site. If you go to the high school webpage, this is for the audience out there, anyone that would be interested, it will say the program of studies. So you just click on that and you'll get the whole new book once we, so if it's approved tonight, we will make those final changes, get rid of the strike throughs and get rid of the highlights. And then it'll be all set to be launched. So we hope to do that Monday next week.
And then I do have one question on the foundational courses. Are those the way I understand it, those are going to be, they'll earn the same credit, right? It'll be just like any other students toward their degree, right? And then they'll just move on to, after their 2 years of study in science, they'll move on to whatever science they want to take.
Correct. So if they wanted to move on to chemistry, if they wanted to move on to an advanced biology class, they would be able to do that. In math, the reason we called it the foundations of algebra is that likely our students finishing that course would then be ready for Algebra 1. So we've tried to title it and line it up that they could just move straight into the next offering.
Thank you.
I just have a comment. Just wanted to thank you for paying attention to English language learners and noticing the need for it and kind of adjusting to accommodate for it. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, if there's any other questions? All right, thank you both so much.
Thank you.
All right, agenda item 7.0, the new 7.0 is the new school building project update. I am well aware I am between me and what you're really here for, so I'm going to keep this very, very quick. I just wanted to talk very quickly about an approach that the building steering committee is taking. Under new business tonight, you'll notice that there is a motion to approve the hiring of a communications and public relations professional for the building steering committee. And just really quickly, I wanted to talk about how we got here so that the community really understands why we're here and what we're doing. We've held a few workshops with town council, as we know, joint workshops, and there was some recommendations from those workshops that we really consider bringing on somebody that would help us to lay out a strategy to communicate and really educate, right, the community as to what we're doing and the need for it and why the unified school and the overall K-8 strategic plan, what does that mean? So we also heard very similar feedback from people in the community as well. And I think the overarching message from both counselors and the community is that the community as a whole, the greater public, isn't really fully informed about the project and what we're doing. So last night or Tuesday night, the building steering committee met and discussed a recommendation. The chair, Dana, that we all know, had received a recommendation for a PR professional, and he brought that person forward for consideration. Some of us here met with her just to meet her to kind of talk through what she could potentially do for the district and how she could help us to communicate this need, how we could educate the public. She's got a very extensive background in communications and the educational field, nonprofit work, the political arenas. So she does bring a wealth of experience to the table. And so given the magnitude of the project and given the feedback we've received, the building steering committee did unanimously vote to bring forward a recommendation for the district to hire her for her services. So that is the long and the short. I know Jillian, Brian, and Carolyn sat in the first one as well. If there's anything you wanted to add to this, to my update.
No, I think that covers it. Thank you, Shannon.
Yeah. So that's essentially how we got here. So we we'll vote on that tonight and then we'll go forward from there. All right. So now the big highlight for the evening, our new agenda item 8.0 is the 2023 Scarborough enrollment study. So we'll invite Rebecca Wendell, the enrollment projection specialist.
Yes. Going up there. Good. get to the start of it. So, here we go. All right. Yeah. I know, right? So hi, I'm Rebecca Wandell. I did the enrollment projections for Scarborough. I have been doing enrollment projections for about, this is a really scary number, 22 years. So I've done a lot of these. It's been, a really long time. I have a lot of experience doing projections. It used to be with planning decisions many, many years ago. But in 2016, when that closed, I took over doing the projections for different districts across the state. There's a lot that goes into this. And so I'll try to hit on everything without getting too in detail for everybody, because I think, at some point you might be like, this is going to put me to sleep. But first part that starts with the enrollment projections is the resident births, and that would be the births to women who live in Scarborough. These are the birth month by year by month. And the reason for that is the students that enroll in schools don't start from, January to December. They go from October to October. So we do want to look at what happened during that October to October time period. I get the data by month, so October does have to be split in half. That is one little caveat, but it's, done consistently throughout. From there, we look at the enrollment data. That you don't have my updated slide because I updated that. I didn't get your data from MDOE. I got it directly from you guys. So there is a little bit of a different piece of information there. So from there, I look at the enrollment for the attending, how many resident students are attending Scarborough schools, how many resident students are attending non-district schools, and get it just a full resident outlook. Also, there's attending data with non-residents who are attending Scarborough. That's a very small number, but they're still counted in there. I also looked at, for this year only, the enrollment by address so that we could figure out how many kids are coming from various different projects in town, just to get a basic idea of, what are these multifamily projects doing? What are some of the new single family housing projects doing as well? Then the next piece was the housing permit data, which I got from the planning office. That has a combination of things. It includes single family housing units. It includes multifamily housing units, but it does not include 1-bedroom or senior housing units. So the numbers you see on mine will not match up with maybe what you've seen on the gross management ordinance, because what they look at is the full number of units that are in town. 1-bedroom won't do anything. Senior housing won't do anything for this. So next I'll go through the historical figures. So just so you get an idea of what's been going on in the last 10 years. And then we'll go through how the projections are made, the different things that have come into what's causing this to do what it's doing in the future. And then I'll give you some ideas of what the housing units have done. There's some little bits of other information that I typically don't look at, but have been kind of interesting to see what's going on in Scarborough. And then I'll give you some enrollment projections from there, so you can see where things are going. In the past, for K-2 enrollment, you can see over time it was a little bit stable there. It didn't, go down for a period, went back up. That little whatever yellow arrow is right where, COVID hit. So you can see there was kind of a dip there, and then it started to go back up again. Nothing too crazy here, but I do want to point out that the K-2 enrollment at one time did have a low enrollment of 566. We're now up to 639, which is similar to what happened about 10 years ago. We're getting back up there. So, it does go up and down. That's not unusual. Enrollment does fluctuate over time. 3 through 5. As what we had seen, what happened in the K-2, it starts to move through to 3-5. So we see some of these same sort of patterns, ups and downs. So before 3 through 5 was a little bit higher, but did dip down as those smaller K-2 grades came in. And that low area is not surprising there with COVID. I think Wentworth was probably hit with the most outmigration during that 2020 time period. So you can kind of see that in the little dip. That's not just for regular movement of students. And then for the middle school, which is kind of, you start seeing some of the most change in enrollment. Back 10 years ago, we were close to 800 students here at the middle school. That stayed pretty high for several years. You see let's say by 2018 or so, it started to level off. And even during COVID, there wasn't a whole lot of impact. They still had pretty high enrollment during that time period, and it's been fairly stable for the last couple of years. But, you know, I think the big thing that I want to point out that from our high period of 805 students and now, you know, down like 670-ish, that's 136. That's a lot of students that have gone down. And that is just overall class size. Right now, the 7th grade class, I'm going to pick on them a little bit throughout this study. It is the smallest class the middle school has seen. So it's tiny. It's 207 kids. So thinking about that 7th grade class, as they move on to 8th grade and then move on to the high school, what's that going to do to the high school enrollment? So we're looking at the high school enrollment. Back about 10 years ago, we were just about 1,100 students or so. That stayed pretty stable over time, but now we're seeing that come down a little bit as those smaller class sizes had moved into the high school and are at the high school. And then I'll pick on the 10th and the 11th grade right now. The 10th grade, it only has 211 students. That's smaller than they're used to seeing as well. And the junior class is about 222. Not as low, but still not that big. So you think about, okay, the juniors are going to be seniors next year, and you know, you'll have the 8th grade move in, but once they go out, they're just going to be replaced by another class that's pretty small. So overall K through 12 enrollment, when you look at it overall, I mean, this is a pretty big district, so it's going to take a lot to make this look like it's going up and down. You won't see that. You'll see more of a smoother trend. But it's still declined for about 3,200 students. It's gone down over the years. I think it started to move up in 2019, and that's where it started to pop up. And then, you know, COVID hit. So then it leveled off at that time period. We've lost about 357 students in the last 10 years. And a lot of that, again, has been overall class size. Now, I want to say I'm not going to get into the projections quite yet, but the sneak peek is that it's going to increase over the next 10 years. And I'll get into the reasons why we're now going to be back on the upswing of enrollment projections here. So looking at the first part of the things that I look at, as I talked about, is births, and then from there, the enrollment. But the first place I start is the preschool migration. And what I call preschool migration is we look at the number of births, and then 6 years later we look at the number of students in the 1st grade, and then you get a migration figure. What happened over that 6-year period? We don't look at kindergarten because there's too many factors that influence kindergarten. Parents can decide to hold their kids back, to send them to private K, to do a half K, to repeat K. There's just too many things that go on there. So 1st grade, they need to be in school by, I think it's age 6. So we go with first grade as the entering class size. And over the last 10 years in Scarborough, you can see, look at the percentage of the plus or minus from births. We have seen anywhere from, I think it's like close to 50% increase from births to what is showing up in our 1st grade to about 23, I think is what the lowest there. So over time, I look at those trends. What are the trends of migration? Scarborough has never seen an out migration that I can remember. I mean, maybe back in the 1990s or something it happened, but typically it's been an in-migration here. The next part of things that I look at for the projections are the grade to grade migration. So if you had 100 kids in 2nd grade, that doesn't mean you're going to have 100 kids in 2nd grade the next year, because that class is moving up to the 3rd grade. So I look at the trends of how does this enrollment move? How do the students move? How do they go from 2nd to 3rd to 4th to 5th? And then that's put into a model to say, here are the trends that make the best fit. And one of the things I do like to touch base on about best fit, some people see that and say, oh, this means the best fit for projections. That's not necessarily true. That is the correlation coefficient's best fit. It's really a statistical term. Sometimes that is the best fit, but sometimes it's not. When you have extenuating circumstances that are going on in a community that would impact enrollment, not just a community, even, worldwide, like COVID. I mean, that obviously impacted a lot of areas. If you have an economic recession, if you have a large housing development, if you have a housing crash, there's all these different factors that can impact enrollment and how the enrollment moves. And you want to kind of take into those factors, especially when you're doing something like, okay, let's, do we need a school or not? You want to know what is happening in your community. I don't think you have it because it looks like it might be my older version, but I wanted to say that there are 4 models projected for this study. The best fit is one, the best fit with a COVID adjustment. I did do some, I'll get into why I made a little bit of adjustment for COVID. There's a housing impact model that takes into account about 190 units. And then I did a really high housing impact to kind of give you the worst case scenario. I don't really think that one's going to happen. That's more or less just, here's a potential. So you can have an idea of what could potentially happen. So looking at resident births, there we go, resident births. This is over the last, I think since 2006, I saw here. So the green is the births that have impacted your enrollment over the last 10 years. The blue is what's going to impact your enrollment in the future. So if we look at the first part of that last 10-year period that impacted it, in first grade, it was 136 on average. It's gone up in the last 3 years to 161. So that's just that alone is plus 25 kids additional births. So that's a little bit more than a full class size. And looking at the births that are going to impact future enrollment, that's gone up even further. So over the last 5 years, on average, 167, the last 3 is 177. But you'll notice that 2021-22 figure is in the 200 range. That's high. So we haven't actually seen births that high since, I think it's 2021-2000. So it's been quite some time since Scarborough has seen births that high. I don't have a crystal ball to tell you how many babies are going to be born in the next couple of years, but I have a feeling that there probably will be a good number. One of the reasons for that is I also take a look at fertile female counts. And what I mean by fertile females is females who are between the ages of 18 and 44. That's typically your age group that you would see mothers. Of course, it can happen outside of that, but those doesn't happen that often. So I'd look at the 10-year census, and believe it or not, the 2020 census data is not released yet. So I had to look at some averages, which I don't really like. There's a lot of margin for error there. But this most recent census looks like our fertile females in this town is up to about 31 to 3,200 women. Back in 2000, there was about 3,100. So we're back to where 2000 was. In 2010, it had gone down to 2,700. So we had lost about 300 fertile females in our population in Scarborough. We're seeing that in births. We're seeing that increase in births. We have more women who are in that mothering age. And I think we are probably going to see the births like we saw back in 2000. We're going to start seeing the 200. And so, I can't say that for sure just because I don't have my crystal ball with me today, but I'm thinking that's where it's going to go. So we're going to go to preschool migration trends. So I can kind of talk about where we were and what's, likely to happen. Over the 10-year period, it was about 42% increase from births into that first grade class. The last 5 years, as I said, down to 37. There is a typo in that 3 year. It's actually at 31%. So it has gone down. You can see the 2 years, 2020, 2021, it did go down, but it started to pop back up again. Yes, it could be at those lower levels. However, when I looked at the kindergarten enrollment for this year, the kindergarten enrollment's pretty high. Already looking at that compared to the births that were 5 years prior, first grade class next year is going to probably be 60% higher than births. So we're already looking at a preschool in migration that's higher. Whether that 60% will continue the next year, that's what remains to be seen. So I have to look at more what is the statistical best fit, and that was the 7-year trends for the best fit. And actually looking at the 7-year trends, they're very similar to the last 3 and 5 because it's an average trend that was looked at. Going on to grade migration. I look at that to see what's been happening. Is anything significantly different from what happened in the past? And over the last couple of years, there have been some changes. The kindergarten to first, the first to second, third to fourth, fourth to fifth, and then some at the high school has changed. The big things to note was the K1, 1, 2, and 3, 4 have experienced higher in-migration at those grade levels. So that's the lower levels has seen higher in-migration. At 4, 5, it went from a very slight out-migration, almost none, to more. There's more kids showing up in 4th grade. At the high school level, grades 8 to 9, it is very typical to see an out-migration of students as they go from 8th grade to 9th grade. Those are kids who, they're going on to private schools, prep schools, wherever else they might want to go for high school. So I'm not shocked by seeing the out-migration there. However, over the last couple of years, it's less. There's less out-migration happening. The interesting thing is at 9, 10, there's an in-migration. That might mean some of these kids are coming back after they leave. They go to private school, it's not right for them, or they go to charter school and it's not right, and they come back. So that has actually increased a little bit. So there are some things that have changed over time. Next one is a little data nuggets. These are the things I don't typically look at, but they're interesting. So one of the things that kind of people have asked, what are the things that might have changed over the last couple of years with COVID? And one of them is kids unenrolling to go homeschooling. Did that really happen? Yeah. So if we look in the past, we see that there's about 2 to 8 kids that had unenrolled to go to homeschooling. That's fairly normal. During COVID years, it was 17 to 25 unenrolled to go to homeschooling. So that's, a whole class size right there. Of course, it's scattered K through 12, but there's a lot of kids. So looking at the homeschooling totals, they're not going to necessarily go correlate exactly with the kids that unenrolled, because some come back, some graduate from homeschooling, some move on to other schools. But still, those figures are showing much higher number of kids who are homeschooled. So that's a potential source of some of the loss that we've experienced over the last couple of years. The other thing that I looked at was the attending non-district schools. That figure has gone up since 2018. So that was clearly before COVID. It's been fairly stable there. And these are kids that would go to places, it could be in South Portland, Cape Elizabeth, Gorham, any of the kind of local communities. The next thing would be kids attending charter schools. That figure hasn't changed significantly either. It did have the highest year in 2018. I think that was maybe when Baxter came online, and there was a lot of interest there. Over time, it's remained fairly stable. So I wouldn't say that was impacted at all by COVID. So it still had solid enrollment. Private school was one that I was interested in seeing. However, private school, their reporting of the data is not always on time. It's not in a timely manner unless they get money from the state, like Thornton Academy is always right on time with their enrollment. So I have that data. That was included in the attending other non-districts because that's very stable. Like Waynfleet, Greater Portland Christian Academy, and what's that other one? North Yarmouth Academy. They in the other years had around 65 kids. That data is not reported in here. So I have no idea in 2022 what happened. And so I can't really make any conclusions from that other than, we do have a number of kids who are going to private schools, and that's obviously been happening for some time. And let's see, the next thing. Okay, so I had some people ask, maybe there was a whole bunch of kids who decided to repeat kindergarten. No. Is like 4 to 6 kids, and that's been pretty consistent over the years. So that's not something that's impacted our kindergarten enrollment. Another question I had been asked was, well, maybe a lot of the parents decided to delay their kindergarten start year. So I went back, and to do that, it was a little bit trickier. You have to look at birth years to see, when kids would when they should have been in kindergarten technically based on their birth year. So going back, I found somewhere between 26 and 37 kids were just held back by parents for whatever reason, one reason or another. And this year was actually the most at 37. That's about 8 to 10 kids, roughly more. Maybe it was because of that, but you can't really make too many conclusions from that because it is 2022 and not in 2021 or 2020. They should have been in school already. if that was an actual COVID impact. But those are just some interesting pieces of information that I wanted to look at to see, oh, are there other things that could be going on? It also helps to support that the COVID adjustment model was probably needed because there were some things that, impacted enrollment over the last couple of years. So the next one. Okay. So the next piece of information that I'll look at is new housing and see what's gone on with new housing over the last 10 years, and how has the development impacted the enrollment? Has it impacted enrollment? What impact would future development have on enrollment? And then most importantly, does the best fit model, the one that does all the statistical trends, does that one actually account for enough housing, or does it account for too much? These are questions that you kind of have to ask to see, do we need to do another model or not? So looking at the housing trends over the last 10 years, you can see single family housing, even though it has fluctuated significantly year to year here from 67 to like 94 units per year. On average, it's very, very stable, 76 to 78, somewhere in there, houses per year. When you look at new housing that's multifamily and duplex, anything 2-bedroom units and minus the senior units, that's obviously not been very stable. And that's all dependent on what's being added in for a multifamily housing project. Some of them are large. So yes, the number of units goes up. You have a smaller project, the number of units goes down. So it makes it a little bit harder to predict what this impact is going to be on enrollment over time. Makes it a little bit trickier, but we're working it out. And then you can see, I'll give you an example of 2022. There were really 306 total units. I have 157 accounted for here. We took out a whole 149 that were 1-bedroom/studio units. Any of those are not included in there. So I'll give you an idea. If you see something from growth management ordinance, you go, wait a minute, these numbers are not the same. It's because we removed those 1-bedroom and studio and 55 plus type senior housing development stuff. So you can go on to the next. It just gives a little bit of a graph. So this goes back a little bit further to 2003. And you could see back in 2003 where the single family housing was quite high. That's the green single family housing. It goes down, you see it can go down in about 2009. That's when we had a recession hit. About 2007, 2008, went down for a period of time, popped up a little bit. And now, even though it's gone up and down, it's still in that 77, 78 range. Multifamily housing obviously is a completely different story, up and down depending on what the project was that was permitted for that year. And I would expect that to somewhat continue. The next one is a little bit of interesting thing that I like to look at. I do find it interesting that those bursts have kind of gone along a little bit with the single family housing. They go up and down a little bit, but they're staying pretty stable. So it wasn't unreasonable to me to see, okay, if housing goes up, would bursts go up? But now we throw in the multifamily housing. So we'll have to see how that kind of plays out over time. That might even make it go up in a different pattern. It might start to do more of an up and down, depending on who is coming into the multifamily housing units in the community. Back in 2015, when I worked at Planning Decisions, we did a full analysis of the housing and the overall impact on enrollment. And at that time, we looked at mostly single family housing because multifamily really wasn't in the picture. So we came up with ratios of what is the overall impact per grade level for these housing units. And for there, we could say, okay, if we know that this many housing units is going to come in, here's what the impact will be on school enrollment. In 2018, I went into a depth of looking at the multifamily housing because there were a number of multifamily housings that were going to come online. And if we look at that, I think it's on the next one. Oh, there we go. That's the one I want. Okay, so this we'll start here with the single family. So I did, in this study, I did look at single family again, just to see, do those numbers still make sense? Has anything changed? So I looked at single family subdivisions. The planning office gave me some new developments, new roads in town, so I could see, okay, here are the new subdivisions. Took a look at those. I had the addresses for the kids to figure out where do they live in town? What developments are they in? So any of the single family subdivisions between 2013, 2018, I had to come up with it was a total impact. It's a little bit lower than the 2005 to 10 and the 1995 to 2000, but it's still pretty high. The more recent ones, the 2019-22, not unexpectedly has a lower impact, partially because some of those aren't fully built yet. Those families are still in the process of moving here. They may not have been here at the start of the year. There's different things there that go on. So I can't really count that in this study. So I did an average impact for future development. I did that using an average of the past study and the new 2013-18 data. What I found was interesting when I averaged it is the new calculation is almost the same. It was 0.76 in the past for the average. Now it's 0.77. I mean, that's marginal. So single family housing is still causing the same impact on school enrollment in Scarborough. That hasn't changed. So we'll go to 2000. Okay, yep, we're on that one. So in this study, look at this one. All right. So for this study, we looked at 8 multifamily projects. So the big projects in town that have multifamily housing were the Burnham Woods, Carrier Woods, Foxwoods, Coach Lantern, Meadowwoods, Oaks, East and West. I did combine them, even though they consider that 2 different projects. Southgate, which is the Avesta project, and then Beacon, which some people know as Gateway. So Gateway, Beacon is still under construction. I had a conversation with their manager there, and I guess some of the units that we thought were originally going to come online are not online yet. They're still being built. So I had to kind of take out all of their 1-bedroom units from this entirely. They're not on there, even just for viewing purposes. But for all of these different units, there's 729 multifamily units. That's actually quite a few. 3-bedroom units are 125, and 3-bedroom units can definitely bring in families. Going to the next one, hopefully you can read that. There's a lot of numbers. So all of these projects in the school system have brought in a total of 210 kids throughout all the grades. So there's a lot of kids coming from these multifamily units, and we can come up with a ratio of what the impact is. So looking at the projects that had 1 and 2-bedroom units only in there, it was a lot less. So obviously families are not as interested in moving into a project where there's 1 and 2-bedroom units, probably because there's just not nearly as many other families either. But they are more interested in moving into those projects that offer 3 bedrooms. There seems to be, even in the 2-bedroom units, there were more kids in those individual housing unit projects. So go to the next one. On that one, you can see each of the studies. So the 2015, 18, and 2020 study. Overall, if I average everything, it goes from in 2015, it was a 0.36, 2018, 0.38, now it's 0.34. Again, marginal changes. So overall, if you look at everything, all of the 2 and 3-bedroom, it is the same. But then when you take out and say, okay, what is the impact of the 2 bedrooms versus the 3 bedrooms? You can see, and nope. The green, the 2018 study. So the 2-bedroom units were 0.46, the 3-bedroom units were 0.68. And if you'll remember back when I talked about single family units, that was at 0.77. Okay, so in 2018, it was 0.68. The purple is this study looking at it saying, okay, what's happening now? Those 3-bedroom units are now at 0.8. That's more than a single family home. So these 125 housing, 3-bedroom housing units that we've added or already had in town are actually bringing in a little bit more in children. So that's something to consider going forward when we see projects that are to be developed in town. If they start saying, yeah, it's all going to be 3-bedroom units. Okay, every one of those is going to be a single family home. That's just something I kind of want to make sure everybody understands with the 3-bedroom units. If it's a 2-bedroom unit, the impact's a lot less. So we'll go to the the current growth management summary. And this is where the town planner helped out. This is one of their slides from their presentation to kind of see where the current growth management is. I know they're talking about changing it. I'm not part of that. So I kind of have to go about where are we now to use for this study. So don't count those 1-bedroom units in the blue. The workforce housing is always an unknown. We have no idea about affordable or multifamily because it's open. But looking at the single family, there's a total of 144 that could happen under this. And then the multifamily is another 97, kind of rounded to 100, to kind of get an idea of roughly what we might be looking at under this for development. So that's where we came up with the total of 190. It's about 100 of those multifamily. And then for the single family, we estimated still that 70 to 80 somewhere. And then maybe some exemptions or workforce housing of some kind. So just another 10 maybe that we don't know about. So that's where we go to our future new housing units, came up with these 2 potential scenarios. Again, that's at 80 for the 190 units is kind of scenario 1. Scenario 2 is the worst case. There's nothing that says to me that we're going to now have 144 single family homes, but it's still possible. So we might as well look and see what is that going to do if it does happen. So that's the scenario 2. And I called that, I think it was the housing impact high. So that way you can get an idea of what the high enrollment could potentially be. So going and looking at the best fit model, we can see what the best fit model actually accounts for preschool migration. Oh, it might be the next one, Diane. Yeah, there we go. All right, preschool migration under the best fit, it counted for about 190 units. So that was on. We didn't need to do anything to that one. The 244, it did not surprising, needed to do about 3.7 more kids to count for that. It's where we get to the elementary migration that things get interesting. The elementary migration accounts for the best fit about 142 units. So if we're assuming we're having 190 units, that's underestimating the impact on your elementary and grade to grade migration. So I've used the elementary migration kind of as a bellwether to say, okay, what does it account for? And then I can use my ratios that we established previously under the single family and the multifamily to kind of get a calculation of what this impact might be if we had that. So for 190 units, that means an extra 20 so kids in K through 2 scattered throughout the grades. If it's 244, we're talking about 63 additional kids. That could potentially bring up enrollment quite a bit. Yeah. So those are the 4 models that I created. The best, yeah. All right. So future first grade. So looking back again on our past, the green's the past, the blue's the future for best fit. And you can see the little lines that show you the other models don't really deviate so much. You can't really see those differences when we're looking at first grade. But you will notice that big peak there. There is a point where the bursts were, right up in there. So the bursts were a lot lower previously, and that's where the bursts start to peak up. After that, where you see that flat line, that's where I have to average bursts because I don't know what's going to happen. It's that 177 average. The other models show it going up because that's where I've used a different calculation for bursts because we do think, I think bursts are going to stay higher. How high, where it's going to go, I don't know. I used a 3-year rolling average. So it was like 177, 186, 195, and then went back down to 180 so that we can get kind of that understanding if something might be happening with bursts. And when I did this in 2018, I had done something not quite similar, but I had added in additional kids into the bursts, and it ended up happening. We ended up having more kids. So this is not surprising to see it kind of peak up. But under each of the models, there'll be different average number of kids. First grade could average anywhere between 236 under the best fit, goes up a little bit more with the COVID, but not by much, the 241. And then the housing impact, again, not that much more, 242, but it's the housing impact one that could really go up quite a bit more if that were to happen, if we were to have a whole bunch of new single family homes coming in. Go to the next one. These are just show you the different calculations. So On that, the lighter blue is the 177 is what I used for the average bursts. The darker blue shows you that kind of rolling average that I used. So both the COVID adjustment and both all the housing impacts use that rolling average. Because for the housing one, I use the COVID adjustment as sort of my bellwether. Because I want to say, did that overestimate or was it right on? I was kind of actually thinking, I'm seeing some of the trends change. I was thinking it might be really close, and it actually was. It was only off by grade to grade migration. But that just kind of shows you the different levels of where the enrollment could be. Going on to the K through 2 enrollment. Oh, that's K through 12 enrollment. Okay, so we'll talk about the overall K through 12 enrollment. As you saw before, is the green, it was higher, it went down, it's kind of leveling off. You'll see it's going to be sort of level for a period of time, but even that blue, which is the best fit model, even that's showing that it's going to go up. That's not including any kind of adjustments for anything. So the purple, if you can see it, it's the straight line that's just above the blue. That one is showing an increase for the COVID impact. And that one is actually the one I'm favoring the most of all these models, is that the COVID adjustment one. And then the housing one would be the housing impact with the 190 would be my next one. So I think enrollment is going to fall someplace in there. You'll see it going up over time. I think the next one's K2. Yep. All right. So again, green is the historical, blue is the future. You see the enrollment popping up there, and that is a factor of those higher level of bursts coming in. We had the lower level of bursts impacting our first grade enrollment. And as I said, the preschool in migration had been a little bit higher. It's gone down, but I think this next year, we're going to see it go back up again. Averages keep it a little bit lower. So we'll see what happens there, but it's still projecting, no matter, what we look at, it's still projecting that it's going to go up. I have the tables here if anybody's interested in seeing the overall differences between the two different models. 2022, we have 639 kids, and on average for each of those models, it's showing the increase. And you can see how each one of them kind of steps up the enrollment a little bit and where enrollment could be over time. That best fit model shows it will have that peak of 777 units in K2. But then if we look at the COVID adjustment, it could go up to close to 800, would be up there. The COVID, the high, it looks like 796 is, and that would be that year that had the higher bursts. So you see that in there? Yeah, right there. Yep. Housing impact, it could be about the same, because the housing impact wasn't terribly different for K through 2 because it's all the trends throughout all the grade levels. It gets higher when we're looking at overall K through 2 or K through 12 enrollment. But that's where enrollment could potentially be if it follows all of our normal patterns that we've had. I do provide these also in the back of the report. You'll see them in ranges. I do 10% for K through 2, 3, 5, 6, 8. 9-12 gets a 5%. I also do a more conservative range of 3% difference, plus or minus. So you can get an idea of what happens if, one of these years is off. That's something that the state actually has asked me to do when we do construction funding for the state. They want to see those ranges just to see, okay, what could potentially be our high, what could potentially be our low, and then they get somewhere in between. They kind of work out what they want to do for their sizing. So let's see the next one. Okay, 3-5. All right. So 3-5, we see that, it stays on the lower end for a period of time. And just as we saw that K2 was lower and that's starting to move up, this is us watching that enrollment kind of go through the different grades. So K5 will not start to see a huge increase until that, 2018-ish? 2028. We'll start to see the enrollment start to pop up as those larger class sizes start to move in from K2. Next, this is table. So right now, 675 is the enrollment, but over time, even the best fit model shows that going up to potentially 844. Yeah. Because that's not just because the K2 was big and those first class, this is as these classes grow, they keep growing every year. Actually, say Diane, you might, if we go back to really quickly. It was back, it was the colored one that I showed of the migration where I said I was going to pick on a grade. I don't know what slide it was. Anyways, so I picked on that 7th grade class that was 207 kids. And right now, back when they enrolled as kindergartners in 2015, that was 156. So that class, there's a prime example of what happened to that class over time. It grew by 50 kids. And that's a small one. You have some other classes over time that are probably going to grow bigger. I mean, they start a little bit bigger. There we go. Yep. So really hard to see that kindergarten in the yellow is 156. It goes up to 207. And yes, it's going to drop down a bit as it goes into the high school, but not by a lot. And so some of the other grades, like the 6th grade, that high, really 6th grade in 2012, that's the green, it was at 286. And although, you know, it stayed up at that 280, 290 until they moved on to the high school. So once they get to that middle school age, that's going to stay higher. All right, so let's go back. Go back to the 6-8 enrollment. All right, so middle school. So as we see, it was higher in the green, about 800. It has come down over time. It still has a little bit left to go down, but it will start to creep back up again. I think they're probably thankful it won't be in that 800 range because I'm not sure where they put all those kids in the middle school, but it will be close. So when we get into the COVID plus adjustment, it's going to be close in the next 10 years if all these trends continue to be the same and all the bursts continue to happen. The only thing that may impact this is, I don't know, we have another COVID or, you know, huge economic recession or the housing market crash, or say Amazon decides to move here and we have all kinds of, you know, building going on. There are so many different things that could impact it over the next 10 years, but that's if everything is staying as it is, that's what the model is projecting. So I get on to high school. So the high school over the last 10 years was staying stable for a while, but now it's starting to see those smaller class sizes phased into there. And then they still have a little bit longer to go past where that middle school dip was. So they'll see a low enrollment, which they'll probably be a little shocking for some people to see Scarborough High School at about 830 kids. They'll have that low enrollment there in a couple of years as that, especially that 7th grade right now, that one starts to move in. But as that moves out, it'll start to pop back up again. Under the best fit model, it does not expect to go too much higher than the current enrollment, but with the COVID, it could be a little higher if we're talking about having that housing impact. It could go even higher than that. So we could be potentially back up to that 1,000 student range there, but maybe it'll be closer to 950 or so. So where are we? Oh, recommendations. Okay. So the big recommendations here, watch the birth trends. I can't say that enough. Now that we see that the births for the last year is 207, we have to watch this, see where it's going. Because if those births stay at 207, I guess my models are going to be off. If the births go even higher than that, you know, you're going to probably want to look at and maybe I can do an addendum. We can take a look again and see, oh boy, what's happening. But this is what you really, really want to watch, see what's going on with births. The next thing, of course, is always watch those preschool, elementary, and grade to grade migration trends. The preschool, even though it's come down, I don't expect it to come down any lower than it has over the next couple of years. And that's not predicted in the model either. So if that stays at the same like 30 to 40% increase, you're good. If you start seeing it staying up at that 60% increase, which is looking like it's going to happen next year, that's going to be a problem. So, and then the grade to grade migration trends, you start to see kids moving in, moving out, and that trend change. That's something you should look at too. But again, nothing is showing that these are going to have significant issues there. Also want to continue to do some tracking of the number of students coming in from multifamily housing. Just so if you want to do this study again in a couple of years, it's really helpful to have that information. So if you just, kind of watch and see what's going on there, especially if we have more multifamily housing, you're going to want to just see what that overall impact is. And then just watching housing trends overall. Because as I said, that high model with the 144 single family housing, I honestly don't think that that's going to happen. But if I'm wrong and it does, you're going to want to watch that and see, what is the impact from that? How is that playing out? And more importantly too, where I went and said that the 3-bedroom units for multifamily, if those start to pick up, you start seeing more of those multifamily units being 3 bedrooms. That's also a big something that you're going to have to watch for school enrollment. I think that's it.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Are there any questions first? Is there you? Carol? Go ahead, Carolyn. Yeah.
All right, just a couple quick questions. First one, I noticed when you were going through the listing of projects or developments that you were looking at,
Mhm.
The Downs wasn't in there, and
Yeah.
Brian was telling me the Downs is a mix because I wasn't really sure.
It is. It's a really big mix. So
How do you
there-
think that would affect your
right.
numbers?
So that was in that category of the 2019, 2022 single families. So they do have some single families that have been built. I think there are around 32 of them. They do have kids in them. So that was included in those ratios there, but they're still in progress of being built. So I think when Autumn had given me some numbers, they've had maybe 30 to 40 single families built per year. Then they've had all these different it's really hard because they've got so many different types of housing. They've got some rental, they've got some condos, so they're going to have to just be considered in these multifamilies. And then when we talk about the growth management ordinance, they are going to be kind of limited under that. If you go to that one that came from the planning office, my understanding, at least from the planning office, is they are going to be in that area 3. They're going to fall under that so that's what they can pull per year. Granted, they can pull in a 3-year period, I believe is what Autumn said, so that they could potentially pull it all at once, but that would be still for a 3-year period. So maybe it'll all happen at once and it would be a big boom, but then they're done for a period of time. So that's unless somebody changes this, and I can't predict that one. Yeah, if they change it, then okay, then maybe we need to look and see what the overall impact would be. So yes, so the housing from it's a little bit too new to get too much data from it. I did look at it for the single family housing, and yes, there are some kids from their single family housing, from their multifamily housing. They fell actually right in line with those projects with 1 and 2 bedroom units. That was like 0.13, 0.16 for now for students.
Thank you. And
Yep.
then my other question was, have you ever gone back and looked at, okay, here's my prediction, here's where we ended up. Does the best
Yep.
fit model just kind of really fall into that, or what's your?
Yep.
was
So
that
the
there?
last projections that I did in 2018, it was following right along with I think it was the best fit multifamily one. Yeah. Multifamily high. It was following right along with that one. That was until, COVID. Because the best fit model was showing that trends were going to be kind of stable and things wouldn't increase. But I went back and looked and said, okay, we were going to have that Beacon project. We were going to have the the Avesta project, the Southgate. Thank you. I want to call it Southwest. I know it's not an airplane. But I wanted to look at those two and see what would that impact. And we knew how many units were going to be in there. We knew how many were 2 bedroom. We knew how many were 3 bedroom. So that one was why we kind of went back and said, what is that impact ratio of each of those things? And I came up with the calculations. Okay, these are 2 bedrooms. This is the impact. These are 3 bedrooms. This is the impact. And it was following right along with that. But once you have something like COVID or, economic recession, which we had also, all of these things throw everything off. So I think from there, I don't know where it went. Did it follow along with the best fit after that?
Followed along the trend until COVID.
Yeah.
We were tracking that every year when we were doing our budget projections, right? We actually
Mhm.
had kind of pulled from your charts and we had, you know, the different models, right? So we're looking at best fit, multifamily, best fit, multifamily high. And we were really trending, matching that multifamily high until COVID,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And then it kind of
yeah, all
it
bets are
had
off.
a mixed bag, right? Like it was staying true at the primary level. It wasn't matching up at Wentworth. It was staying true at the middle school, right? So this is a really important time to have this reset.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's to some extent, I know COVID, we want to put it behind us, but to some extent, for some, it's not. So I would also say maybe this year, there's a little bit of impact to it. So that's why I think it's good to watch for the next couple of years and see where things really end up. Do we end up saying, maybe this is our new normal. This is what it's going to be. Or maybe we kind of revert to what was going on previous. These are the things I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
I did. You were talking about the fertile females.
Mm.
The whatever. First of all, how do I opt out of that? You said there was a significant jump in that.
Yeah, and I think it's on my updated one, which didn't get linked or I don't. Yeah. So the census, let me see, because I have it here I can tell you the numbers. So every 10 years, as you know, they do a census and they go through all the people and take a look. And I'm as old as I am. I've been through 3 of these with numbers. So it's always taken 3 years to get the census data for the 10-year. Why? I don't know. It takes so long, but it takes 3 years to get the census data. So in 1990, the fertile females was about 2,800. By 2000, that jumped up to 3,100-ish. 2010, it went back to 2,700. So it went down. So these are the 10-year census data. So that's pretty reliable. The 5-year estimate's not so reliable, and that's all I have right now to go by, but that is showing just over 3,100. So we've gone back up again. The other interesting thing is the females who are 45 plus has also significantly increased, but that's also not surprising. We are the oldest state in the nation, I think, still. So it's not surprising that we're seeing that number go up. But yeah, I'd like to opt out of that one. But, this is one of those things. If you have a greater pool of women who are in their fertile years, you're more likely to see more children be born. And that appears to be what's happening. Yeah.
I just want to be sure because in my head, when I was reading through your report, I think I placed a different emphasis on this than what it is. When you say preschool migration, can you define that for me?
Sure. So we have the births that are in a year, and then 6 years later, we have a first grade. So it's preschool from that birth year to that first grade year that they're in, that we call that preschool migration. It's not kindergarten first. So 6 years later, what's that migration? What's that trend? So if we have 100 births and you have 120 first graders, you had 20% increase. You had a pretty good migration. If you have, 100 births and you have 80, you have your out migration. So it's just knowing, where do you start? So if you look at the ratios that I have on there, a 1.000 would be no migration. Anything anything above that, that's an in-migration. Is 0.9 or 8 or whatever, that's an out migration. So I think you won't see any out migration on your preschool. But if you look at the grade to grade one, you'll see there was some right there. So you'll see that the high school level, 8 to 9, that's where you start to kind of see that. And in the past, there had been some out migration as well. Like at 7, 8, there seems to be some going on there too. But interesting, if you look at 10, 11, there's, had been some in-migration, almost none. So that one, if you look at grades 10, 11 for the last 3 years, you'll see it is 1.001. That basically no change.
Yeah, that's where, is it, what slide number is this? Can you just hover on the 15? This is, yeah. So on here, this slide, I want to be sure I heard you correctly. You said there's an expectation of a 60% increase in first grade.
Oh, no, that's on the first grade. So let me see if you can see it on here.
I thought it was this one, so it must be right around here. maybe.
Doo, doo, doo,
Or the one
doo.
after.
So it's probably in a table in in the report. So if you have I don't know if you have the report, can tell you exactly where to look on the report. You can see it. Where is my first grade? It's kindergarten. Oh, yeah, you can see it. Okay. So Diane, the one that has all of the different models for first grade, it had a bunch of different colors, blue and maybe a little after that one. I don't know what. No.
Yeah, try to,
Yeah.
try the other way. Yeah, this way.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, that's it. Oh, shoot. See if I can figure out where it is on here. Yeah, that's the historical one, but it's for the 2000, it would be the 2023-24 first grade class. I'm just trying to figure out what slide number it would be. Okay, so there it is. So it's after the future first grade class sizes, I think.
Right after the.
Yes, yeah, okay. So there, no, that's all right. So, all right, so the actual migration trends are not showing on there, but if you take a look at the 2023-24, you'll see that there are 138. That was for births. That's a pretty low birth number, but our kindergarten class it's at, let me go back to that number. It's like 220. 213. Okay, so that's a pretty sizable increase. Just looking at, of course, kindergarten isn't our entering class size, but that's a pretty sizable increase from that low of 138. So then I look at, okay, what is that trend between kindergarten and first grade? What normally happens? Normally there's still an increase. There's still an in-migration of students. So although there's 213 kids in there, I think there's going to be more by the time they get to first grade. How much more? That's going to be the question. But even still, it's still going to be quite a bit higher preschool if we look at births to what that first grade is next year. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yeah, I'm just wondering where we're going to, put everybody. That's where, yeah.
Yeah. And that 138, that's a low birth year and you've got 213 kindergartners. So what's going to happen when you get up to that 207 birth year? You see your first grade is going to be 186. That means your kindergarten will probably be somewhere around 275.
For what year is that?
It'd be 2028, class of 2000, or the first grade year, that year when they come in. So there'll be kindergarteners in 2027. Yeah. Last year was a big year. That was, like I said, that was the biggest year we've seen in years. And whether
And that's
that can,
hoping that we don't come over here
yeah, that's that.
for that in
Right.
the sense of
Yep.
counting the number of kids,
Yeah. Yeah.
the 295.
Right. Yeah. I have a feeling you'll be someplace in that COVID adjustment housing, somewhere in there.
Yeah, no.
Well, yeah, when you, And when you talk about the capacity sizes for our schools, that Blue Point is 241, Eight Corners is 236, and Pleasant Hill is 178.
What's the maximum for Wentworth?
Capacity?
Yeah.
800.
And it looks, right.
Is there a way when you were going through this that you could see, because obviously you looked at the different housing developments and a
Mhm.
lot of them are kind of scattered around.
Yeah,
town.
right.
Is there a way to tell if there's certain areas of town that are growing faster or slower than others?
Yeah, and actually, I think the planning office had in their, the growth management thing, I want to say that they had like a scatter plot they had at the town. And then they had like little glowy areas of where that development is happening. And the ones that I looked at were in some of those areas. Some of them were not, but for the most part, yeah, there were a couple of new streets on, I don't know, off on the other side of town that was just a smaller road. So it had maybe 10 houses. But then you have your bigger growth areas. You got, your Layton Farms. That one has number of houses over there that had a lot of kids in that one. So let's see, I'm trying to think of what other, 'cause I looked at so many different housing projects. There were some roads that they were considered new roads, but they were really extension of other roads, like Jasper is sort of an extension of an existing road. And then Memory Lane was another one that's an extension of a road. They had just a couple of new houses put in there. But it was interesting to see, okay, what's the difference between the old houses that were in there and the new houses that were in there? And those new houses were still bringing in children. And that's just kids that we know about, the kids that are born. We don't, if a family moves in, we don't know what's going to happen after that, if they're going to add a few more children. And we don't know if they were born someplace else and moved in. We won't know until they register for kindergarten. Or maybe they'll, if we find out they go to community services or something, but we don't know how many are in that. That's where you get your preschool yeah.
So all of this data, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding, all of this is based on what's been happening in Scarborough, based on, fertile females here already in Scarborough, not ones that are projected to move into the area based on previous rates.
Yep,
Is that right?
the best fit is based totally, and actually fertile females doesn't come into play with the best fit. It is just births,
Okay,
preschool migration, and then grade to grade
but
migration.
we're assuming those people are here already, or you're saying they could be moving?
According to the census, if that's right, it was the 21 estimates. They're here, but that if those they're estimates, and they were 2 years ago. So it's May 23, I think, is when the census said they're finally going to put out the information. I'm really waiting to see what does it show. And then that's even 3 years old, by the
Right,
time we
that's-
get to it. So we go, okay, if we're really at that 31, where are we now?
Well, and that's why I'm guessing just from residential real estate world, Maine, there were just statistics that we shared in my brokerage that Maine was the seventh state, I believe, in the country for the most people moving in during COVID.
Mhm.
So we had, as a state, we were one of the top in migration states. So and I'm seeing it right now. I mean, in the clients in my private life of what I do, and
Mm.
66, I did the numbers the other day, % of my clients are out of state looking to move in.
Mhm.
So, and we see a lot of that in my brokerage. So I think it's interesting to talk about that, because that's not going to show up in your
Right.
data, what you're saying, because it's 3 years old. So
Right.
it's interesting.
Yeah, and that's why going forward, you really do have to keep an eye on those trends year to year. I know, these enrollment studies are pretty in depth and they take a long time, and to take a look at them, and yeah, honestly would not want to do this every year. But, it's one of those things you do want to kind of just keep watching those trends and see, does this fall way out of line from what we expected? If all of a sudden next year's births look like they're 125, oh, okay, so that's something else you want to kind of consider. But if they're, 225, that's another story. And over time, obviously, births have gone up and down. So there's possibilities for this to fluctuate and be something other than what we think. But just on average, if it goes way up, that's, something to consider going forward. Have some time at least, because that's what it's It's only what, 4 years away?
Yeah, I had a similar question to Brian's because I did notice in your report, it said that it doesn't include turnover in existing housing market or residential development. So if you account for the people that are leaving, right, and selling their houses to younger families or people with younger kids, we don't know what that impact would be on top of this that we're already seeing.
Right.
But none of the three of these, if you, let me see how I word this. If you could choose one of the models that would potentially show us what impact turnover would cause, is there one that?
Yeah, so turnover of housing stock is generally something that happens, obviously every year. There's always
Mhm.
turnover of housing stock. And sometimes you see in communities where there's older families that are moving out and there's newer families moving in. Sometimes the older families are staying put. There's all these different trends that could happen. So that's why me and before when I worked at Planning Decisions, we've always kind of thought that the best fit model takes into account those turnovers of existing housing stock, unless that turnover of existing housing stock was far higher than it's ever been before, which is why during the recession of 2007, 2008, 2009, we see some of those changes in enrollment because there was nothing, and no one wanted to buy a house. So now everybody wants to buy a house, but how many houses are there to buy? There's that thing. So I would consider it to be in the grade to grade changes, but that's why you should really keep an eye on everything year to year just to see, okay, does this fall out of line from what we expected? In the ranges too, there's the ranges. Those also help with some of that.
You said that, were you done?
Yes.
Okay, you said that, like elderly or, I don't know what's considered elderly housing actually. Is it 55 plus community?
Yeah, it's 50. Yeah.
Um,
I know I don't consider 55 elderly, but yeah. They're typically not going to bring in school age children, I guess, at that point.
And nobody
Right, but is
55
there-
could have
is
kids
there
in school.
any
wait,
study ever done of like, if there's a large like a large development of 55 plus housing, how that might impact like the sale of homes from people wanting to downsize or whatever,
Oh,
and therefore bringing in families?
Yeah,
Anything like that
there
ever?
might be one. I've not done that. There might be a different, I know there's some other consulting agencies that have kind of looked at those things for the planning departments so that they can kind of plan when they have these developments come in. I haven't done that specifically to say, okay, here's what's happened. But then again, I don't know that Scarborough has ever had a huge 55 plus development come in where there's been like, everybody goes to it. There's a few here and there. Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of focus on what I'm focused on at the moment, which is sort of overall looking at your presentation, which was really, really interesting, but like kind of focused on those last slides. It looks like in the next 10 years, you're expecting a pretty significant increase in K through 2. In the neighborhood of about 87 children. You're looking at another significant increase in 3 through 5.
Yeah.
2 buildings that we have space issues at that are pretty well established. And then a more modest impact at the 6 through 8 level and then the high school level. High
Yeah.
school is almost negligible, but in the next 10 years, we're looking at significant increase, a very significant percentage increase in the number of children going into our primary schools
Mhm.
and going into our Wentworth Middle School.
Yeah.
That's the takeaway.
That would be the takeaway. And a lot of that is driven by your preschool in migration and then the births and then the grade to grade migration of kids moving in. There's just, it's staying strong in this particular community. And I say Scarborough is unusual from a lot of communities in Maine. We are similar to say Yarmouth, Falmouth, MSAD 51, Cape Elizabeth. Trying to think if there's another one. Sometimes York has been like this too. There's just some communities where people go to. This is where they move to, go have their kids in the school system. Some of these other communities in the area, when I see it, I'm like, yeah, it's going to be an out migration. I can tell right away. And sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised. Oh, look at that. It's not so much. But this is just how some communities roll. And Scarborough's always had a pretty high in-migration of families looking to move here for the school system.
Yeah, I just, the preschool and migration slide of the last 10 years was pretty compelling. The percentage of preschoolers. What number is that slide? It's not number in my, wait a minute,
I know.
13.
Yeah,
There we go.
all right.
But this doesn't tell us necessarily how many kids are going to preschool,
No,
right?
I don't
We
have.
don't know that.
This
Yeah,
is-
no, if the town had its own preschool, I could have that.
Right.
I don't have that information, so I don't have any of the private, the pre-K.
Right, so the number of first graders that were born in Scarborough and then all of the
Other ones. who-
kids who move in between
Yeah, between that
that
birth year.
date, their birth date and
The time
when
to first
they would
grade.
start first grade. And so that immigration percentage is really high.
Yeah,
And therefore you're expecting more kids to join or to more families to move in time for their kids to attend kindergarten, first grade, second grade. At the younger grades, the
Right.
in-migration is much higher.
right. And that's where we go back to that class of, that's the seventh grade right now, that's 207. I mean, they started out way low. I mean, they were 156. And each year it's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And still, it's not even at some of the higher levels of some of the other grade levels. It's still only 207, but it's gone up that much over time as more kids have moved in. And that's the kind of the pattern of what happens, they move in and it's low, like that kindergarten class might be 213, but I expect, when they get to first grade, I'm not sure, I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. I think it's like maybe 225. And then that'll keep increasing as they go in. And then, when they get to the middle school, maybe it'll level off, maybe it'll go down a little bit, and they go to high school, same thing. But it doesn't change so significantly that you're like, wow, that's a huge change. It's just, little ups and downs here and there as they go through. But it's really that K through 6 where it keeps growing.
There's definitely a lot to digest, a lot to think about for sure. Are there any other questions or comments?
Time about the projections that you did for the first grade, you could do that to that 207, and then the next period is 107.
Yep.
Basically just use the 207 anomaly, or
That's where
are
we
we safe for going back? to
we
the
don't
norm?
we don't know. So, it's the good thing is those kids are 6 years out from coming in. We don't know how many are going to be born in the future. So I've done projections different ways. I've done an average. So on the best fit, that's the 3-year average of births. So that would be the 151, 174, 207. That would be that 177. So the last time I did these projections and I said that, with the multifamily, I was like, they've got to be bringing in more births. So I upped it. I think I upped it 2, 3, 6, and 8, I think. So I kept increasing the births a little bit. This year, I was like, boy, with that 207, what do I do to kind of capture that potential increase? So I went with a rolling average, which, so it's the 177 is that 2019, 20, and then it goes down to, 2020, 21, and then using 2022, and then so on and so forth, just to kind of get that, here's what it could go if it's a rolling average, if we're going to stay in that range. And granted, I could be off, and you could find out next year, instead of 177, you're up at 210, and ouch.
I think
Yeah.
those are the pieces that, as you've said, are going to be really critical for us to closely monitor.
Yes. So if you get into the phase where you're talking about a school or schools or whatever it is you end up doing, as you get closer to making decisions, you probably want to look at this again. And I wouldn't be opposed to just say, I could throw it in, like if things look really off, like, oh, we do have 225, I could pop it in and just run it and say, here's the best fit. And here's, here's where the change could be. It could be, you could say, oh, it looks like it's going to go up now by another so many students or whatever, so that you can kind of get a rough idea of what's going to happen. Yeah. It is just a lot of monitoring.
All right, we do have a couple of counselors in the room and I just wanted to ask if you had any questions for Rebecca while she's here?
Yes.
We'd want to mic them. Can they go to a mic?
Yeah, so you would just want to, yeah, you can, yep, absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks. I'm seeing this for the first time, so I want to thank you for the chance to sit through this and to hear the discussion. So thank you, and thanks to you for the great work that you've done. I remember some of your prior presentations, and nice to see you again. It's been 5 years though, I guess, right? So, whoa. Time flies. I just want to make one comment. One comment is that sometimes they say timing is everything, and I'm really pleased that this presentation took place at the same time as the GMO Counselor's Corner over at the public safety meeting. The good news is the town council has not made any final decision on the GMO. So with these projection numbers, I think there's probably going to be a fair amount of discussion about how the rest of that should go. But I'm not a betting man. Couple of things I was going to say, there are some things that some statements you made about data that I thought were a little concerning. One is you're counting 0 for studios and 1 bedrooms. And you're also counting 0 for senior. So I can't believe there are 0 people living or 0 school age children, in those categories. Okay.
The senior housing I didn't look at, but I.
Yeah.
Hey, Rebecca, would you mind going back to the microphone? Sorry, you guys will have to share.
So I would say this falls in the same category as the fertile females. So we have fertile females that are 18 to 44. That's not to say we wouldn't have a 16-year-old that could have a baby or 48-year-old who could have a baby and would fall out of those ranges. It is unusual, but when statistics, we're looking at those, it's so few and small, far between, it's really not going to play much of a role in the overall impact on enrollment. So to look at this, it is best to take out those 1 bedrooms because I didn't see any, because I did have all of the housing units and have all of the addresses, and I was given that by all the property managers. So I could say, oh, this one's in a 2-bedroom, that one's in a 3-bedroom, that one's in a 2-bedroom. I could just go back and see not one of them was in a 1-bedroom.
One other question I had is you mentioned that.
Don, can you turn your microphone on?
Thank you. I can tell I don't really need to have the mic. I just don't hear me when I talk. I get accused of that. My mother used to claim she could tell when it was recess time. We lived a mile away from school. It was when I ran outside and was.
Yeah.
The other question I had is you had several private schools not reporting.
Yes.
So it seems to me that number I also would believe is not 0 in terms of people that migrate
Right.
out of the district over a
Yeah.
period of time.
And that's the unfortunate thing. It's kind of out of our control. It's,
Right.
what Wayne
Right.
Fleet, when they want to put in their data and when
Right.
Greater Portland Christian School wants to put in their data. But it's also part of why it's excluded from the enrollment projections, because if I included that, it would basically show in 1 year, you've got 60 additional kids and next year you've got only 10. So it would really skew the trends. So I have
I understand.
to remove those.
Great. 2 other things I was just going to mention. One is in portraying the data, and you broke this down into 3 categories. You had K through 2, and then the middle group, and then, the later years.
Hmm.
So in looking at all those slides, the raw numbers looked really dramatic, but the percentages over a 10-year period, if you're comparing 10-year, percentages, those did vary quite a bit.
Yeah.
Some were quite small, actually, if you
Right.
compare the 10-year averages. One was 5%, one was 10%. If you do that over a 10-year period, it didn't look like quite as dramatic a number as the raw numbers.
Right. Yeah. And that can be, every trend is different. So sometimes you can see really strong, trends where even in first grade, the preschool migration, it had been at 46%. Now it is down to 31%.
Yeah.
So if we say, okay, 31%, that's a 10% difference.
Yeah.
If it's going to stay at that could be 10% fewer students. But also knowing that our kindergarten class is higher, I don't think it's actually going to be at that 31%. I think we're going to creep back up to that 40%.
So again, we kind of look at, averages over time, year to year. I don't love using 2-year trends at all, but I only did it for this because of, the COVID impact here. Really, 3 years is a trend.
Yep.
So those 2 years of bursts, the 174 and 207 for bursts, that's only 2 years. But I do think it's probably going to continue to go up based on the fertile female information that we have and the number of families that are moving here.
So there's only two other things I'd like to say. One is the other question that I had was about pre-K. The superintendent mentioned, accounting for pre-K, and that seemed to be a big wave coming this way, but and I apologize for my ignorance in not knowing this, but I should
Right.
probably have already understood. But what is the current offering for pre-K in our district?
That one, I don't,
None.
there we don't have
Okay.
pre-K.
All right, so
Yeah.
that seems to me like a big delta in terms of our assumptions, in terms of what we're
Yeah.
doing today versus what we're offering. So the
So-
final thing.
Oh, just really quick on pre-K. So I know that there was some discussion at the state level. I don't know what's going to happen there, but about having to offer it. So other districts that do offer pre-K, I have seen anywhere between 60% of the kindergarten class attends a pre-K up to about 85%. It all depends on the programming of that pre-K. Is it half day? Just some kids go in the morning, some kids in the afternoon. Is it full day? Or is it a lottery system? It all depends on what they offer, but I've seen it anywhere between there. So you can kind of get some rough ideas if that were a question you were interested in finding out, is how many pre-K could we potentially have? You can look at the kindergartners and go,
Right.
Somewhere between 50 and 80% roughly.
Yeah, and just to clarify, my comments are about migration of preschool aged kids, not,
see.
that has nothing to do with whether or not the kids are in a pre-K program. You have a certain number of kids who are born in Scarborough, right? And then those kids hopefully are all in that first grade class 6 years later. And then there's a whole lot of other kids that are part of that first grade class that have moved into Scarborough in between when they were born and when they started school.
And those
right.
before school
And those
years.
before, so preschool, not
Right.
meaning I'm in
A program.
attending preschool as in families and students that are moving in prior to starting school.
Great. One thing I'd like to say finally is that this is a huge challenge, and it's you don't have the benefit of a crystal ball or tarot cards. So, I applaud the efforts that you've made so far, and the data will lead us to hopefully the right decisions. I look forward to a robust discussion, moving forward between the school and also the council. And I'm Chairman Anderson will correct me if he thinks that I've stepped out of line on any comments, but we look forward to a robust discussion and really trying to work through this together and get at the right solution for our town and for our children. So thanks very much. Appreciate the invite, and we look forward to moving forward with this together. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks.
You want this one or the other? Take it.
Well, he's getting comfortable really quick. So to Don's point on the chart on page 13 that Jeff was alluding to, the preschool aged chart,
Mm.
even if it's down to a 31%, that is a 31% increase.
Yes.
In kids.
Yes, but
So
that would
even if
also-
we're just.
Right.
it's-
Right, but for
significant.
next year, my worry is next year, because if you did 31% from the bursts, it would mean that kindergarten would be an out migration as they move to first grade. That's not gonna happen. Just for next year. After that, it's right, they're already in school. We know they're here.
Right.
So we don't have out migrations. You're not going to see that kindergarten class go down unless something weird happens, unless we have another one of these weird, whatever that we can't predict.
Go ahead.
No weird things. We don't want any more. I'm not, we're all done with that.
Sorry. So I wasn't, I didn't come prepared. I just wanted to observe, but Rebecca, nice job as always. Question that comes to my mind or something that may warrant further research, and I don't know if there's data to answer these questions, but where are the bursts coming from? Is it because of multifamily that, that's come online, or is it something,
Yeah.
is it COVID?
That's one of those things that I can't tell with the information that I have. I'm not even sure that it's out there with the vital statistics of like where the parents are. I mean, I'm sure at the town level, when they get the birth certificate, they could see on that. That's not information that I'm privy to. So I don't know if it's out there or not, but there are privacy concerns too with moms finding out where they are in town. I don't know that people would love the idea that we're finding out where they live.
Have you seen recent birth data for other towns, or is
I
that not out
have.
there yet?
Yeah,
Is
I
there a
have.
spike there as well, or is?
There were some, so I just did Cape Elizabeth not that long ago, and there were some bumps there, not as noticeable as here. I haven't looked at too many others recently, but I could if you had any, I could just do Falmouth and whatever, Yarmouth, and just see what's going on there. But, just knowing Scarborough and knowing what's happened in the past, I do know that back it was the 2000 range when we had the higher development that was going on. That's when our births were way up. We're also in this higher category, but that was single family. We didn't have the multifamily at the time. So that's the interesting part is I don't know if they're coming from multifamily units or not.
Well, great work.
Okay.
And it looks like we've got a big K2 enrollment coming in the next couple of years, so.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. Are there any other questions among us? Well, I will just echo, thank you so much for your hard work. This is a lot of work, and we really are grateful that you continue to work with us and do this work for us.
Yeah. And hopefully it's helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, yes, and we will post the full enrollment study from Rebecca tomorrow and the updated slides as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
Perfect.
thank you.
Yep.
All right.
Hey, Shannon,
Yes,
can we have like a
just a quick
5-minute
break.
ration? Yeah, thank you.
Sure, we can just take a quick 5-minute recess.
So moved.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Welcome back. Agenda item 9.0 is the chair's report. My chair's report is to be very brief. I know we just have a lot of information that we've seen and gone over. And the next slide, if you would mind advancing to the next slide. This is just the verbiage about for operating protocol number 13 that we discussed at our workshop. It will show up in new business for us to vote on tonight, so we can. Thank you. This is operating protocol number 13 that we worked on at our last workshop. I just wanted to put it there as a refresher. We will vote on this in new business. And then I know there is a lot of information in the committee reports, so I am going to go ahead and move into those. So agenda item 10.0 are committee reports. We'll start with finance.
All right, we did not have a meeting in February. One was just scheduling conflicts, and we decided that with just a couple more weeks, we'd have a lot more data on the budget to review. So we are meeting on Monday from 3:30 to 4:30, and we're going to be discussing the 24 budget and as well as the building project update regarding the PR consultant. We do have the first reading of the budget coming up on the 16th. And roll out to the town council on the 29th and the first reading of the town council on the 5th of April. We have our large workshops coming up as well on Monday, the 13th and Wednesday, the 15th. We got the times and dates up there. So I think that's about all I have. Lots of information to come.
This will definitely be our busy season. Are there any questions for Carolyn? Right. Next is policy committee. So we'll go to Freyla.
Thank you. The last meeting was February 6th. We had 17 members of the public attend and 4 offered comment. We addressed the draft calendar and continue to work on the transgender and gender expansive student policy. Our next meeting is Monday, 3/6 at 4:30 to 6. It's a hybrid meeting and held in the central office conference room. And over Zoom, the agenda items are final approval of the school calendar with the one addition. We can continue and with any luck can finish the transgender and gender expansive student policy. And then if we have that, we'll move on to, we have naming of facilities and we have a bunch of other items of note coming up, some policies that have to get done and some safety policies.
Thank you. Any questions for Freyla? All right, curriculum. We'll move to Brian.
So our last meeting was February 8th. We discussed a handful of different items. Mainly, it was an overview of curriculum and assessment to kind of set us up for the remainder of the year and just working together as a committee. We got a good understanding what federal grants, kind of the process for that and how we get funding for that, different committee roles and expectations moving forward. And then Sue Ketcha joined us, and what you guys heard tonight, we had heard pretty much the same thing the other day at our meeting regarding the high school program of studies. And I'd just like to, again, thank her for all her work with that, because she really did a great job during our committee meeting, going into great detail, just like she did tonight. Upcoming meeting topics, among other things, some things that we have expressed an interest in discussing moving forward are what the procedures might look like for publishing curriculum online, because we've had some public requests for that, as well as understanding how civil rights topics are lined up with our curriculum. If you're interested in being a part of those discussions, our next meeting is, well, moving forward, our meetings are the second Wednesday of every month at 6 o'clock. And our next meeting is March 8th.
Perfect, thank you. Any questions for Brian? All right, communications. Jillian.
All right, so our last meeting was April 9th. We discussed further developing a plan for the roundtables. We are taking suggestions for any clever names. Do you have a question?
Last April?
Yes, last April. It was last April. Thank you. I don't know why. Okay. Anyway, we are looking for more Spotlight Award nominations, and we are looking to put out a new poster, something maybe Jenna made a QR code that might make it easier for people to apply. And we are just looking for timely requests for communications for anything pertinent that maybe you would like out on Facebook or anywhere else. And our next meeting is March 9th at 4:30 PM. That's right.
Thank you. All right, long range planning. John.
Our next meeting is March 8th. Thank you.
You. DEI committee, so Frayla and Jillian.
We had a recent meeting on let me look at my notes, on the February 7th. That was like this week, right? Yeah, earlier this week. Or February 28th, so it was Monday of this week, and then we had a meeting on February 7th. We have gone over on the 7th, I think I discussed last time, we talked a lot about the recording policy, and then we touched on the transgender students policy, and some of the members of the DI committee attended the policy meeting to talk about that. And our last meeting on the 28th was actually really exciting for me, although probably for nobody else. But what I was so excited about was that I think there's beginning to galvanize a plan around strategic planning and a really serious discussion about how to plan sort of what a strategic overarching plan would look like and how to accomplish that relatively quickly, which is again, very exciting to think like sort of like getting the organization together and the procedure together and then sort of moving together in a way that's productive and might actually accomplish some of the goals that the committee has and the charges that this board has charged the committee with. That's where we're at.
Perfect. All right. Thank you. Any questions for Frayla, for Jillian? All right, next is building steering committee. So Jillian and Brian.
All right, so I know that there is another building update, right?
We already
Okay,
did it.
all right. Oh, yeah, well, I don't want to repeat anything, but anyway, so we're just continuing to work on the land. Hopefully that'll be in the near future, that will be decided. We, as Shannon said, we have engaged with a communication professional. And she has an excellent background. Shannon already said that. Obviously the enrollment study will be a good discussion point. We're going to continue to develop the business case to present. And there will be a town council and school board communications, some communications work. We're going to do a roundtable. I'm meeting with them next, the town council's communications committee next Thursday prior to the school board communications committee, if anybody would like to attend.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, are there any liaison reports?
I had a question for.
Oh, I'm
for
sorry.
Jillian.
I didn't ask that. Yes.
Do we have like a line in the sand drawn on a date that we have to have a site picked out by to make all this work? And are we getting close?
I think that I think the line in the sand was right around now. But there's still time, hopefully, for the negotiations to go through. And of course, that will possibly impact planning. So, I mean, there is a little bit of pressure there. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think it was our line in the sand was now. That's the goal that we had was right around now. And we're not quite there. They did discuss at the meeting the date. What is the date that Harriman needs to have an answer so that it doesn't impact design? And so they know that date. And town council members that were there feel confident that we would have an answer well before that hard date. I'm being a little vague and I know that, I'm sorry.
I don't need specifics. I just wanted to
Yeah,
make sure that, I mean, because this is listening to what I heard earlier, it can't be more
focused on getting things moving forward. And I just want to make sure that we're at least on track to make sure that that happens, because I can't even imagine the, whoa.
Yeah, I think
Yes,
that they,
well-
the goal is to be, it is of course to have it, be able to announce something soon, to Jillian's point, but really to make sure we're not, interfering with the design process too, that part isn't being interfered with. Are there any other questions for Jillian and Brian? All right. Now, are there any liaison reports? Did you have were you saying something before? The liaison reports or no? I might have missed, I thought I heard you starting to talk, but I might have missed.
Oh, yeah, I was saying, okay, no.
Right. So I know that, I don't look like the high schooler, but I'm gonna take over the student report for, our student reps who both have, school events happening this evening. So at, the middle school, they had a kindness week before February break. The kindness week poster winner is sixth grader Clara Humble. So congratulations, Clara. You can see her poster there. Very beautiful. Her work is just beautiful. So yes, she was the winner of the poster contest. It was displayed around school during kindness week, and some of the things that they did, you can see on the side. They had a kindness spirit week. So they Monday wore all colors of the kindness rainbow, Tuesday heart eyes for being kind, wild for kindness Wednesday, Thursday ride the kindness wave, and Friday was their undercover kindness. So random acts of kindness. So they had seems all in all like a great week at the middle school there. The next slide is about the high school. The Oak Hill players will be performing Alice in Wonderland this weekend. Admission is free. There is a request of a $5 donation. Those are encouraged for anybody who is interested in attending. It's Saturday and Sunday. And then the next slide was exciting news. The boys swim team won the state championship this past weekend. So this is their second year in a row winning. So that's exciting news for them. I also know the robotic, I'm going to ad lib here. The robotics team also won the state championship as well this weekend. So it was quite the exciting weekend for Scarborough students all around. Yeah. All right. Any questions for me? Hopefully not. That's that might be the extent of my knowledge. All right. Agenda item 12.0 is new business. I'm going to bundle item 12.1 and 12.2. The meeting minutes of February 16th, 2023 workshop, and the meeting minutes of February 16th, 2023 business meeting. Do I have a motion to approve them as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. 12.3 is the approval of the 2023-2024 high school program of studies. Do I have a motion to approve it as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All right, all in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. All right, 12.4 is a motion to approve the revised protocols from the February 16th, 2023 school board meeting, which is operating protocol number 13 we just saw. Do I have a motion to approve as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Me.
Yes.
All right, so I'm more of a processor, not always good at speaking without. I'm very careful with my choice of words. I try to be, and so I went and put down in written form some of my thoughts after our workshop 2 weeks ago. So I wanted to address some of the points that were brought up just from my perspective. The first one being with whether to record or not. Do we go back to the days of pre-COVID when we just expect everybody to show up? So my thoughts on that was basically COVID has reset the world for better or worse. Live streaming and recording of meetings is no longer a nice to have. I consider it table stakes. We can talk about going back to the way things were pre-COVID and, but taking this away, in reality, this is just the new reality, living in the world of things being recorded in my point of view. Second point I wanted to make was to the point of people need to show up to be engaged. And my thoughts on that are parents are busier than ever. One parent I talked with who would love to attend more meetings in person or via live stream, she just simply cannot. Her husband works multiple jobs and she's on dinner duty, taking kids to the various activities. So those activities happen typically when meetings happen. So it's very difficult for her or her husband to attend. Can they put earbuds in at night and listen to the recordings at night? Yes. But during the evening hours, it's difficult. And in my personal experience, there are lots of things to take interest in between board and committee meetings. And I have to consciously draw a line in the sand of, okay, my priorities have to be family, work, and then this. So that's me. So I know everybody has different priority levels and but it's really hard to be able to attend everything that interests everybody. So maybe I'm the only one that feels stretched, but I find that a little hard to believe. So providing the community a way to stay informed by watching a recording at a time that works for them, again, I feel is table stakes in today's world. Another point I had was, as a parent and a community member, do I agree with the work? A lot of the work the DEI committee is charged with? Yes, I absolutely do. Do I agree with all topics and agendas that are addressed and move forward? No, I don't. And that's okay. We don't all have to agree on everything. And I don't expect everybody to agree with me. And that's okay. What I do know is, in my opinion, the DEI committee has a lot of influence between the policy and the Civil Rights Club. We all received a letter to the board regarding their views on recording meetings. They've submitted a letter as well to the policy committee regarding recommendations on some various policies. So their work impacts all students and families in Scarborough. Not just the students, we talk about limiting it to the students that are in the committee, but their work truly impacts all the students in the community. So the DEI committee's impact stretches well beyond just the children participating, and the community deserves the ability to be informed enough to offer support or an alternative perspective as topics are addressed. Fourthly, transparency, in my mind, is critical for all committees. And given the nature of the topics that have been and will be discussed, having the trust of the public is paramount. The only way to do this is by being fully open and transparent. I'm not a fan personally of the terms equity and parity. I do wholeheartedly support fairness and equality. And to this end, the DEI committee should be subject to the same standards as the other committees. I completely understand the emotional charge behind protecting the kids. At the end of the day, this is a committee, just like every other committee, that influences policy and practices at schools that impact all students. As I've previously noted, it likely has a lot more influence at school via the Civil Rights Club crossover participation, whose activities, to my knowledge, are not board approved or supervised. So as we prepare to bring up our finalized protocols for a vote, I sincerely appreciate everybody's willingness to listen to me and hear a different perspective. My hope is that we can still find some middle ground to task the committee with finding a workable solution for all. And that's the end. Thank you all for listening.
I do want to say quickly, I am also a processor, and I have many times, I just actually had this conversation with Jeff and Diane. There are many times where I sit in here and I say something and I don't quite get my full thought out. And then later I'm questioning what I said or didn't say. And I had one of those moments after our workshop. So when I mentioned that Jeff and I had discussed pre-COVID, what was happening with meetings, we did have a conversation about potentially going back and going to in-person meetings and really doing that. But the reality is, just to what you said, technology is there. We do have it. It does, there is this great opportunity to allow community involvement, to allow us to meet a little bit easier during the day. And so ultimately that is, it is something to use and something that we've invested in. And so I didn't mean to imply that we should go back, and oh, no, I think this is me, this is how I process. It happens all the time. And I think about what I said and what I should have said and thoughts I should have finished. And I definitely had that thought when I left the meeting. And I too, this is we've spent a lot of time on this one topic because it's incredibly important. And I keep coming back to, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know how we do both. And one thing I did notice, like when I reflect back on the workshop, we did hear from the DEI committee what their preference would be, I'll say, right? We had our own personal discussions in here. But one thing I didn't hear and that I would be interested in, and I don't think I needed to hold up this vote, but what I'd be interested in knowing is, do the students have an alternative? So that was something Brian had brought up at the very first time we talked about this. And I don't know that we ever circled back to hearing that. So for me, is that something that maybe Freyla and Jillian, you would be comfortable talking with the students on the committee? Is there something that they think could be the middle ground, give us this middle ground? Is there anything we can do to get there? Because I don't know what the answer is. And that's what I keep struggling with. I do value transparency. I do value our community members being involved. I value them attending meetings. And certainly that is the great, I would say, the benefit of having Zoom is that we have this ability to provide more. But I do feel this urge to also protect our kids. And that is me personally speaking from my perspective. So if there is, like I said, I think we can move forward with the vote, in my opinion, but I would like to know if they have something.
I want to add to that. This may be where we are right now. But as that committee evolves and gets a little more on stable ground, I think this topic can and should be revisited. And I think that we will have a very different conversation in a year. And I think that maybe that's something that we encourage with students, is to kind of like maybe step into that a little bit and develop their skills in public speaking. So I don't want anybody to think that this is like this is the end of the story. I do think that that committee is just evolving so much. And as Freyla said, there's some really good stuff happening right now in terms of coordination and kind of, there's a lot of people on that committee. And so I think that some of your and other community members' desires will be met. And I do really hear that. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with a lot of the things that you said. I think at some point they can get there. I think during our workshop, we were really just kind of figuring out the language of that specific goal. So that really wasn't the time to figure out how this committee should be organized. And I think, as you go through your strategic planning and your retreat, there's probably going to be some conversation about that too. I think the biggest thing that we are all sensitive to is just protecting the kids and making sure that whatever they're saying is not living on the internet forever. And when the committee starts to organize and figure out that plan and of how things are going to go, I think eventually they'll kind of figure out a good working space to be able to publicize the conversation without kind of putting our kids out there for everyone to view.
Like in reality, though, what do you think will change between now and then to make it safer for the kids? I mean, what, you know, the issues they'll be addressing later, a year from now, will probably be just as emotional and I don't know what another word for it would be, but, you know, do we expect the climate to change a lot so that things won't be so controversial? Is that what?
I think so. I don't know if this is a direct answer to what you're saying because
Yeah.
I don't know. Obviously, you know, we don't have a crystal ball and we can't predict, but this is kind of the parent slash teacher and just who I am coming out. And I feel like it's our job as being, you know, not only board members, but also being members of this community. And we're all educators. I've always, even before I was a teacher in my past life, I always viewed myself as a teacher. Having that mentor role within our community, I think is important. And so I think one of the big differences between now and then is the expectations upon the kids that are in there. And so they're getting involved without that expectation. And now I think that that's where that conversation can and should, very similar to what Jillian is saying as well. I think that it's the evolution of the world that we're in, that DEI committees, I said this in the workshop, they're everywhere now. And there's a reason for it. It's because people want to see change. People want to see the, you know, just the camaraderie amongst different diversities within our world. And so I think that for me, what I'd like to see from the DEI committee to hopefully have it come back and revisit us whenever the time is right, is to help coach and mentor those students in a way where they can get to a point of comfort to understand that, you know, I don't expect us to pressure them into being filmed, but into a point of where they know that their voice is really, really powerful at their age. And I think it's something that a lot of young people underestimate, but we can't just force them into the spotlight in a manner that isn't something that they were, you know, we didn't prepare them for. And so I think that that's where I'd like to see us as community members, board members, DEI members, help to coach those students to get to a point where it's like, you can really be a part of change here, you know, in a really positive way. We want more people to have access to your message and to hear what we're talking about. Right now, we're protecting you, but in a way, we also want to help coach you to get to a point where we can publicize this more. So there's a level of comfort, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. And it's also, you know, when this committee started, it has gone through a lot of change and evolution since day one, right? And so I think that to your point, Carolyn, that's another piece that is a little bit different when these, all of the kids that are on, I think they're all at least from the second year, right? I don't know that we might have a few from left over from the very beginning, from day one. And when they signed up or when they joined, when they volunteered, this committee was meeting privately and behind, not live streamed. Members in the community were not invited. And so it has gone through these iterations to where we're trying to bring more transparency to it. And so it's kind of like bringing these kids along on that process too. So I do think that that is a difference. I also know that the committee has some vacancies in the student positions and in the community positions as well. So they are going to be actively bringing on new students. So that expectation could be very different for these new students versus the ones that started. So I do think there's some difference there as well. And also thank you for sharing. Are there any other comments? All right, so we have a motion and a second to approve the revised protocols from the February 16th, 2023 school board meeting. So all in favor? Okay, all opposed? Thank you. All right, agenda item 12.5 is a motion to approve the hiring of the communications and public relations professional for the Scarborough Public School Building Steering Committee. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor? It's unanimous, thank you. Agenda item 12.6 is an appointments. 12.6.1 is the middle school swim. No, excuse me, the middle school assistant swim coach.
Right. So that's in the packet. Just a one row spreadsheet.
Do I have a motion to approve the middle school assistant swim coach as presented?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. Agenda item 13.0 is adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Look at us getting right under that 9:30 time. All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. Have a good evening.